Go do what I was saying to do. No, thank you. What in the hood? But it sound like so funny. Oh, they just gotta go ahead and send the deal. Oh, she too slow. Well, we can jerk out to you.
You happy now? Yeah. Just a fucking superficial cunt. Makes money in this shitty world by giving people what they crave. Because this world, and this world is fucking crazy for entertainment. So get fuck on it.
I don't tell my little daddy that
The
she trying
neighborhood,
to
as you
stop
can
working.
see,
My entertainment
and
is
as was
traveling.
then, is unpretentious,
Just quit that she said, do you have any
honest,
sign
and
here?
plain.
I don't think that's
Those legends that what we call unsung heroes and heroines, we're gonna have to start making sure that people don't miss it. Because if we allow folk to miss history, then people can come up and make up what they want to make up.
What we're doing is telling the story of another freedom struggle.
God, that's
Stop turning
mother.
around and don't.
I couldn't believe my eyes. I could not believe my eyes.
We'll give you this, listener. I caught the guy who killed him.
I'm not gonna believe Martin Luther King Jr.'s death was natural. I'm not gonna believe his mother's death was natural.
We'll never know in our lifetime what the real deal was on the King thing.
From the marriage of Martin Luther King Sr. and Alberta Christine Williams King, they brought love into the legacy, the love of God and the love for humanity. It took the two of them together to do it, and they did it.
The family was always very strong, very supportive, but participated in all of the movement, but also had more than their share of the tragedies.
I was at the church service. I was not in the church at the time. I was actually on the outside of the church, but I was here that day.
It's almost as if the King family is being tested. I've never seen a family suffer so much tragedy in my life. The city loves that family. This nation loves that family.
I watch it every day. Our world in disarray. Lying, killing, and greed have become everything. But we must press on. We are not done till Jesus comes.
We all live in a world where fake news has become the inverted, awful new normal. The public is constantly lied to. Our society has adjusted and become comfortable living with fake news, misinformation, disinformation, false accusations, distortions, confusion, distruth, embellishments, mistruth, untruth, just outright in your face, bold face, no count out and out lies.
I don't have much confidence in any of the media, of course, in this country in terms of these kinds of cases and these issues. That's part of the problem.
Now, for a breath of fresh air, a real moment of truth. Here now is the true story of Alberta Christine Williams King.
And this place was oftentimes full of children from the neighborhood. So much so until sometimes it was thought that I was maybe running a neighborhood playground.
From time to time, she is mentioned or remembered. An occasional tweet is noticed, or the local news media will run a 1 or 2 minute report about her life. Although efforts are appreciated, honestly, how can the story of a woman who bore and raised children that changed the world be adequately told in 2 minutes or less? As incredible as it seems, this one unsung woman not only rocked the cradle that ruled the world, she was also one of the first high profile mothers of police and government violence perpetrated against her sons. We all know too well the horrific stories of Michael Brown, George Floyd, Sandra Bland, and Eric Garner. One of the first mothers of government violence perpetrated upon her children was Alberta King.
This woman is Alberta Christine Williams King. She is the matriarch of the King legacy and the King dynasty. She was undoubtedly one of the most influential women of the 20th century. She reigned and was quite powerful during the 1920s through the early 1970s, a time in history before the internet, before cell phones, but still a time where a mother calls for justice. Yet, her calls went unanswered.
I'm sure, with her own sons and daughter, she had to have been very concerned. There are stories that my Aunt Christine King Ferris has written about things that happened, especially to my uncle, but to all of them. And my grandmother would talk to them.
All walks of life lived here together, and there existed a wonderful friendship, fellowship, and closeness to one another.
Mrs. King embodied the public history of violence against the Black American family. She evidenced violence perpetrated on her children. The matriarch of the first family of nonviolence had deadly violence perpetrated against her two sons and indeed was a tragic victim of gun violence.
I should have been there for you. Alberta Christine Williams was born on September 13, 1904. She was the only child of Reverend Adam Daniel Williams and Mrs. Janine Celeste Park Williams. Reverend Williams was pastor of Ebenezer Baptist Church. He and his wife Janine lived on Auburn Avenue and were a couple of the early organizers of the Atlanta NAACP.
And we heard about in the family that Big Mama did have a chauffeur when she was a young girl. Her parents were very busy. Her dad was a pastor forming the NAACP, National Association for the Advancement of Colored People. Her mother, a school teacher and a community woman. And so they had to have help, which included a chauffeur to drive Big Mama to school every day.
Alberta graduated from high school at the Spelman Seminary. During the summer of 1920, Alberta began a 6-year courtship with Michael King. After studying, she earned a teaching certificate at Hampton Normal and Industrial Institute. Alberta and Michael King were married on Thanksgiving Day, 1926, in the sanctuary of Ebenezer Baptist Church. Alberta proved to be a kind wife and loving mother. She worked hard to instill self-respect into her children.
And the other children were regular children, and they participated in all the childhood activities.
I think about my grandmother often. Mama King, Big Mama. Granddaddy called her Bunch. In the early days of their marriage, she was Honey Bunch. And as the years went by, it was shortened to Bunch. And I would ask, what did you call her Bunch? She said, she's a whole bunch of love. And he would say, just a wonderful grandma for you and a wonderful wife for me. So, Big Mama, I called her, just a warm, wonderful, delightful woman with an incredible sense of humor. One of her best friends was Mom's Mabley. We were a close knit family. My grandfather, Daddy King, had seen me in a dream 3 years before I was born. And he convinced my mother that she was ready to be a mother. Let's have this baby.
Really got serious, and we got too serious. I remember on one occasion that I became pregnant, and so I told my mother, I said, Mother, I said, I've done something. I said, and, got pregnant now, and what we gonna do about it? She said, oh, we're gonna go and tell Reverend King about it. We're gonna tell Reverend King about it. So we went and had a talk with Daddy King, and the first thing he said to me, he said, you know what? He said, we're going to have this baby. He said, because God showed me this child 3 years before she was born. He said, there will be no abortion. There will be none of that. He said, I know you're in school. It's your first year in college. And AD is in college. He said, but it won't be none of that. He said, we're going to have this baby. We were married at 18 and 19. And my beautiful firstborn was a girl. And her name is Alvita.
My grandmother welcomed me into her home with open arms, and Aunt Christine still lived there as well. Now, Daddy, A.D. King, Mama, Naomi were married after I was conceived, and I was born after they were married. Uncle Emil was soon going to marry Aunt Coretta, so as young men, they were out of the house, and Aunt Christine was there. So I was raised by Daddy King, Mama King, and Aunt Christine, Christine King Ferris. I saw my parents as well, and I was in and out of two houses. My grandmother's home was absolutely remarkable. It was a very beautiful home, 2 stories. It had what they called the dumb waiter, the little elevator that went up and down between the floors, and you could deliver hot coffee or tea upstairs without coming downstairs and all of that type of thing. It was an elegant home. Her piano was there. She was a beautiful musician and choir director and music director and all of that.
Yeah, we were close.
Christine was the oldest, Martin was second, and then AD.
Well, we had a rather normal childhood, like sisters and brothers. We stayed together, played together, got into trouble together. So we had a rather normal brother and sister relationship.
In her young adult years, Mrs. King was an active member of the NAACP. She was involved with the Young Women's Christian Association and the Women's International League for Peace. Alberta Bunch King served as the organist for Ebenezer Church from 1932 until 1972.
She understood the importance of a beautiful home, a beautiful life, a supportive wife, but she never allowed that to prevent all of the desires of her heart. She was a well rounded, fully rounded lady. She was a great gardener. She had a beautiful garden outside. She grew flowers and vegetables. So, just a very well developed Proverbs 31 woman. So, Big Mama took pictures herself, and she was a photographer, and she hired great photographers, and she insisted that we have records, pictures, so that we could remember through the generations and be able to discuss that and share. She motivated some of my children's books. I have two, and especially one of them King Rules for Children because I wanted to record, and I had an illustrator, so they're cartoons. And I wanted to record some of those memories. And I know my grandmother, the historian of a family, and I believe that there's one in every family, in every generation. I believe that I became a guardian of the King family legacy because of my grandmother.
She was like a second mother to me. I had my own biological mother, but after having married into this family, and Daddy King became my father figure because, as I told you, I never knew my own father, so he was my father figure. And then Alberta Christine Williams King became my second mother, and she was just that without a doubt. It wasn't a day that we didn't communicate. Maybe we didn't spend hours and times together. We were just that close, and she was just that interesting a person in my life.
Big Mama was the kind of mother-in-law who would go shopping and bring dresses back. And when the children started coming, dressing the children and all that kind of thing with my mom. So it was a loving, loving relationship. They were very close throughout Big Mama's life. My mom, Naomi, talks about Big Mama all the time. And this is just a very precious, precious memory.
Alberta King experienced tremendous sorrow in violently losing both of her sons. The devastating violence inflicted upon this peaceful woman, a pillar of the Black community, is mind boggling. Dr. Martin Luther King Sr. and Mrs. Alberta King buried their first son, Martin Luther King Jr., the civil and human rights leader. Allegedly, he was assassinated by an escaped convict, James Earl Ray, in Memphis on April 4th, 1968.
I can't imagine my name just sounds so bad to hope so. Or visit consumercellular.com.
Alberta's second son, Reverend Alfred Daniel Williams King, was found dead of mysterious circumstances at the bottom of his swimming pool on July 29, 1969, just 15 months after the assassination of his older brother, Martin.
Keep on telling him, Lord, when I go out to South View, when I go out there now, both of my sons is in all together. And I've got to look at the other. Lord, make me strong enough to take it, but I've already told him I'm not going to live out there. Lord, Eddie's not out there, and them owls.
And at one point in the course of my work, I encountered an assassination plot against Martin King that was supposed to take place in Louisville. And the reason that was supposed to happen was because of his visits to AD, and he would go there. So that was one of the target cities where the possibility of assassinating Martin was definitely considered.
So these high-profile assassinations seem to have an aura of suspicion tied to their occurrence. That's from my perspective, is unexplainable. Now, maybe the real truth might be too much for the public to fathom. That there are people who will literally set up and plot How they gonna exterminate X, Y, Z, 4 these reasons? Could go right by kids. Who's gonna be under the umbrella of freedom?
Martin's mother was killed actually in church, and the killer at one point admitted to his father that he had really come to try to kill him, and the extent that that was more than just a singular act, I don't know. It was very clear that the focus was on ultimately on the assassination of Martin King because of the threat that he posed to the existing ruling power structure in America.
Mothers then and now experience the endless, stinging loss of the death of their children, murdered by government agents, killed by government plots, and suffocated by government police.
I don't know what's next. I don't see how it could be anybody now but me next. Don't worry about me. I go for those you see seated over there until God takes me. I'm not going to leave you now.
King, you need to do something because one day people are going to come in the church and start shooting. Now, there's a scripture that says, the thing that I feared most has come upon me. My grandmother was shot in church playing the organ, playing the Lord's Prayer. So what she feared did happen. That also lets me know that she was somewhat prophetic as well.
Then shortly after that, his mother was killed while she was playing the Lord's Prayer in church on Sunday morning. So the tragedy of the family is just overwhelming.
You wanted the buzz of the century, Julia? You'll have it. I'm offering you today. Live. It's finally midnight. Happy birthday, Julia.
Now, on that day that she was killed, June 30th, 1974, on that day, Esther Darlene was alive. We drove up to the church, and when we got to the corner, I'm about ready to make our turn, Darlene got out of the car and went her way, and I had to find somebody to park my car so I could go in.
When my grandmother was shot on June 30th, she had called me that morning. I was living in sin. I want to say it that way. I was divorced and was living with a man who was not my husband. My grandmother knew that, and she called me. And many Sundays she would call, or Saturday evening, please come to church tomorrow. I had left the Lord for a while then. I was disillusioned, disenchanted. I had had abortions and miscarriage and a divorce. So I was doing my thing, to my deep regret.
Now, on that particular Sunday, we were at church, and the way Ebenezer is structured, at that time there was a little strip mall across the street, and so in that strip mall there was a little a washerette and a little store, and so the washerette had games in, and from time to time we would be there playing games as opposed to being in the church. Some people say we would cut church.
So when I went in through the basement, and I was coming up the steps, and I peered up under the railing, and I looked and saw that there was nobody in the audience, just a few people scattered around and stuff and all that. And I said, what in the world is going on here? What has happened here in this church?
That particular morning, she called and said, please come to church. There was an urgency in her voice. I decided I would go. I asked the man who I was living with. We drove in my car. He let me out at the door of the church. As we drove up, people were running out of the church and screaming.
And so on this Sunday, we were cutting church, and all of a sudden, there was a great screaming. So we ran out and saw people running and hollering, and we didn't know what happened.
So I got on up and stood up and got right near the communion table. And Calvin Morris was in the pulpit, and he was saying stuff like the perpetrator has been caught and this, and I'm looking around. Where is everybody? What's happening in this church? I'm looking.
I like the
So I'm
song.
standing there trying to get my
But I told
bearing
you,
and
nobody can't know
by it
no
all,
DC
and I looked
like that
over
unless
to the
somehow
right,
girl. I know the
and there
girl.
was Jimmy Mitchell, the lady they said was shot in the leg.
I tried to get
What you
on to
doing?
see myself, but
I
I
ain't got what
knew
you been saying.
I was already, he had already shot me when I tried to get under the seat. But what I thought,
Huh?
if he shot me once and he was right there by
No,
me,
white person.
he might shoot me again. So I was trying to get under the seat to keep from getting killed.
She was just in there. They hadn't attended to her yet.
That's
And then
it.
the deacon that had been killed, I don't know whether he had been removed, but I couldn't tell not. But the deacon had been killed. I don't know whether he had been removed. Let's see. And I'm still standing there trying to get my thoughts and stuff together. And I look up to my right, and here come the stretcher down the aisle. And
What are you doing,
so I'm
Shady
looking to
Step?
see what's going on. And by the time they get to the organ, I'm over there at the organ, and I'm looking over to see. I said, "Oh my God, that's mother!" I couldn't believe my eyes. I could not believe my eyes.
And so we finally got into the church, and when we walked into the church, the first thing I noticed was just pocketbooks all over the place. Going up the steps, just pocketbooks, and you still people hollering and screaming. And so when we got into the sanctuary, you could see the people who were just in shock. My grandmother was still on the ground.
They had to pull the bench back, reach down and pick her up, put her on the stretcher. And when they got on the stretcher, they started up the aisle to the ambulance. And when they did that, I was right behind the ambulance.
I made my way towards the entrance, and a stretcher was brought out. My mother was running, Naomi King running by the stretcher. I wasn't aware that that was my grandmother on the stretcher at first.
God. So we get out to the ambulance, the driver, me in the center, and then the other attendant over here. And mother was, back there in the back. And so my gaze was just on her. I couldn't stand it. I was just speechless. I looked at her, and she had her right hand to her jaw, and she mumbled, "Ooh, ooh." I said, "Oh, I don't believe this is happening." So now I don't know whether she was still alive or what. That was the last sound that I heard her make.
My brother Derek was inside, and he had run out and down the back steps after the assailant. So he was trying to apprehend the man who had shot my grandmother.
Um, best I can say, I will give you this little snippet. I caught the guy who killed her. Very rarely do you look down the barrel of a loaded gun with somebody squeezing the trigger in the chamber of the revolver and bullets get struck, but they don't fire and you don't get shot. That's my experience.
People in the church were running and screaming. Several had been shot.
We make our way to the hospital.
Hey neighbor, you switched to T-Mobile home internet yet? Trim your hedge. It's $35 a month with no price hikes. Bam! It runs on T-Mobile's wireless 5G network. So all you gotta do is plug in one cord.
T-Mobile 5G home internet, just $35 a month. And with Price Lock, we won't raise your rate on internet.
I did it.
Ah!
I switched to T-Mobile home internet and I am loving it.
Don't sneak up on me like that.
Again, working with her, how they punch, parents. And so they looked over and saw me and they said, get that woman out of here. She doesn't need to be in here. I said, but that's my mother-in-law. I said, there ain't nobody else around but me, and I just got to be here with her. And they said, I understand, but you can't stay in here. You got to go outside. So they put me out.
My grandmother gets to the hospital. I get to the hospital in another vehicle. By that time, my grandmother had been pronounced dead.
So I walked back out into the hall, and as I'm standing there, that's when family members had got the news, and they were coming in. Like, I remember my father-in-law and my sister-in-law, her husband, I don't know who else was that. And they were, of course, were like screaming, And then that's when the thought really hit me that my second mother was mortally wounded in there. And wasn't a thing I could do about it, but just look at her and, be there for her. And I said, God, thank you for having me here, the right place at the right time. And I thank you. And I don't remember anything because I must have passed out, but I don't remember anything else.
What in the world would I have done if I had refused to go to church that day? What would I have done if I refused my grandmother's last request to me?
The country experienced another tragic outburst of violence with the cold-blooded murder of Alberta Christine Williams King.
No, I was sitting in the back, and that's why I got a better look at him.
A man later identified as Marcus Wayne Chenault leapt from a pew ranting things like, I'm taking over this morning. Stop this, and you are serving a false god.
A loud noise and wow. Miss King said, ooh, that sounds like a bomb. And all of a sudden, he just was on the seat when I saw it. It was done so quick. And you just heard the shot, heard him shooting. Bow, bow, bow. I'm in charge. I'm in charge. And people began falling on the seats and running and getting panicky,
That's right. And he just stood up and started shooting.
Did he shoot up?
He was shooting everywhere. He was shooting like this. He just shooting like that.
He fired a handgun aimed at Mrs. Alberta King, but also struck Deacon Edward Boynton, killing him.
That's right. And he just stood up and started shooting. But after he shot, I seen some people fall, and then I knew. I said, yeah, he's shooting for real, Then this gentleman.
No, I was just trying to see if
everyone started falling.
Just an unspeakable tragedy. When I heard about it, I came immediately. It's almost as if the King family is being tested. I've never seen a family suffer so much tragedy in my life. The city loves that family. This nation loves that family. And what we want to do now is to try to comfort them and the family of Deacon Boykin and the families of the others who have been injured.
I have very mixed feelings about that. Anger was the first one, and sorrow for Dr. King Sr., whom I knew very well. But these two people brought into the world Martin Luther King, and thus they rendered a service to all humanity. And for them to be visited with this cruel denouement is something that's hard to understand.
Going up the hall, And when I get up the hall, I look down the hall, and there were two policemen, and they had somebody on in the middle, and they were on the sides, and they were pulling him along by his pants and stuff like that. I didn't know who he was at the time, so I said, "Who in the world is that? What is the man?" That man's eyes was literally coming out of his, bullet out of his the socket, so to speak. I said, "Who is that? What is that?" And they were pulling him somewhere, and
Derek did apprehend Marcus Wayne Chenault. He beat him so brutally that one of Chenault's eyes was partially out of the socket. They were able to get my brother away from Chenault, so my brother did not kill Chenault. I'm glad he didn't.
There's an incident that happened related to my grandmother's murder that I find to say to God, okay, you win. But try and explain a call to ministerial service. I haven't found anybody who does this on a intelligence sense to a listening ear about how God says, I want you to talk for me. I want you to work for me. I ain't found nobody who's able to do that intelligently. It's just something. It happens.
He had personally seen the young man who committed the crime. He was obviously overwhelmed with religious fanaticism, was apparently out of his mind, and that he deserved prayers instead of punishment. That he was very sorry about Deacon Boykin. That he was praying that the other victims of the shooting would recover.
Marcus Wayne Chenault. Chenault was sentenced to death for his crimes. The sentence was upheld on appeal, but his sentence was changed to life due to the King family's disapproval of the death penalty. Chenault was serving a life sentence at the state prison in Jackson, Georgia, when he suffered a stroke on August 3rd, 1995. He never regained consciousness. Marcus Wayne Chenault died at the age of 44 of a stroke in a hospital in the Atlanta suburb of Riverdale, Georgia.
We often talk about the man who killed Big Mama. Granddaddy went to the jail cell and visited Chenault and told him pretty much, you've taken away the most precious person on earth to me, and yet I forgive you. Yet I love you. So it would take many years for my brother Derek or me to understand the divine love of God that can forgive every wrong.
I don't have many memories except the shock that came forth because it was totally a shock. We didn't anticipate it and expect it. So, as was in the case of any of those tragedies, you're not really prepared for them.
I did not see it happen with my eyes. I heard it and saw and certainly experienced the aftermath.
It was just something that, I'll never
Because she live in the hood too. Fixing each other. They already told me already. The whole I already kidding me. You can't be doing all this. I ain't know what Dr. Fox was doing to me when I was not there.
The King family Known throughout the world for nonviolence, attempts to make sense of the awful loss of three close family members, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., Reverend A.D. Williams King, and now Big Mama, Mrs. Alberta Christine Williams King.
With each tragedy in our family, there was a shift in family dynamics in each of our lives and how we each knew to deal with it or chose to deal with it.
The devastating trauma of three violent murders within the King family has taken its toll and deeply affected the surviving family members. Each member was left to process deep personal loss. In the midst of their pain and grief, the family and inner circle had to find a way forward. All the while presenting a strong public image, the King family has endured tremendous private pain.
Pastor Roberts, I said, I have friends who don't go to church and don't have a relationship with the Lord, and their family seem to live on. But I said, in my case, it seems like we've been losing a family member every 2 or 3 years. And so at times growing up, I've sort of felt that that was, not going to say a curse per se, but that we were just destined to, die early. And so I had to sort of work my way through the process.
So your uncle was shot, your daddy was choked and killed, your grandmother was shot. How can you say praise the Lord? I just believe what I was taught, that God still loves us regardless of our circumstances.
God moves in mysterious ways, and so you sort of understand things differently. So from my grandmother to all of that, it was an adjustment. Even to this day, I don't understand it in terms of why, but my faith has grown to say we understand it better by and by.
I think I have it all together when I'm out front, but when I come back into my apartment and fall apart, then that's when I ask God, what is it that you're trying to tell me? What are you saying to me? What do you want me to do? What that? And that is when and how I get my strength and how I'm ready to face the next day when I go up like that, because He quiets my every concern and all that stuff. So that's why hopefully I'm able to handle all that.
My uncle was under 40 when he passed. My father was under 40 when he passed. My brother was under 40 when he passed. So my oldest brother, I remember telling him, I said, now, the men in our family don't live to be 40. And I think he was about 38. I said, go and get your life together. You ain't got number 2 years to turn it around. He said, don't talk like that. Don't talk like that.
In dealing with death, with me, again, how I process it is something that happens in life. People die. I'm dying as we speak. When I exited my mother's womb, I started dying. Or better still, this is dying. I'm not.
My grandmother.
The NASCAR Cup Series hits the high banks of Atlanta. Sunday at 2 Eastern on Fox.
This is Carl. He'd never really thought much about his credit scores until he got Credit Karma and used his credit scores to move on up. By putting in the work to improve his scores, he got access to a better credit card and that sofa she liked. And when it came time to buy a home of his own, Credit Karma helped him take things to the next level. Just in time. Intuit Credit Karma. Karma you can count on. Download the app today.
Here we go again.
Wait, there's a Red Hulk now?
I know, he's red.
He seems very angry.
Why is he so mad?
Sorry to interrupt, but what do we do about this?
You must be new in town.
We use Tide Oxy Boost.
It's a lifesaver.
The most powerful clean in any universe. Tide.
Looking good.
Thank you.
Well, at least it's on time.
See Captain America, Brave New World.
Became more and more stoic with those incidents. After she was killed, my grandfather changed forever. There was a sadness. There were times he'd laugh and he'd enjoy a good chicken dinner or something. When the little children were being born, my little children, his grandchildren, his first great-grandchildren. But he was very, very sad. I became just different. I didn't care.
Taken, you ask questions, but you're more in a posture of mourning the loss. And I guess when you get farther away from it, you begin to ask questions, but we don't have any definitive answers, and perhaps never will.
The devastating impact of 3 murders within the King family have left its members to process insurmountable losses. The pain is only intensified by knowing there is so much more to the triple murder story of the King family that includes local and federal branches of the United States government.
Somehow we had to help people to realize that when they are mad with the one closest to them, it's not because they are mad with that person so much as they are totally frustrated over the system. We talk about, and forgive me, but we talk about our young men calling women different names, but we forgot that in the 50s and 60s, government policy changed so that a woman who was getting money to care for her children could no longer stay in the house with her mother. So the government separated mothers from grandmothers. The government then said you can't have a man in the house if you're going to get something for your children. So the government systematically, legally broke up the black family. They did more damage to the black family than slavery did.
We knew that the Birmingham Police Department was behind it because they was involved. They would send people to the mass meetings, and we knew, but we had nothing to hide. So we would have the security people there. We tried to have security on certain homes. We tried to put security on the leadership. But they had the military, but we had something that was over the military with us, and that was the Lord Almighty.
So we know that leadership was being focused upon by particularly military intelligence at that point in time. Now, in that context, then, the King family has to be seen. So I think that they were going way back to Martin's father, grandfather. There was this surveillance that took place.
I hear what you're saying. I said, let me ask you a question. I said, are my wires tapped? He looked at me. He said, let me tell you something. He said, you see that telephone pole sitting out there? I said, yes. He said, you see that car sitting right there, that car? I said, yes. He said, I can sit in that car and hook up and know everything and know everything that goes on within. So I don't have, you need me. Did I answer your question about your wires tap?
I think it's pretty clear that a lot of black activists and black leaders were under surveillance by military intelligence, by American military intelligence, going back to the second decade of the 20th century.
I'm not going to believe Martin Luther King Jr.'s death was natural. I'm not going to believe his mother's death. So there's so many questions that have been unanswered to this day that most people have forgotten, but I will always have that suspicion in the back of my mind that AD.
I know, because they're trying to be hating on you and stuff. They're trying to find reason to hate on you.
Just like his brother. With somebody else's involvement.
I started knowing when I made like this year, like dudes say you get paid 20.
There
are links.
They be trying to hate on you, baby.
There are common denominators among all these people. They were trying to bring about a change.
Well, we don't got to talk to the people.
And when you do that, trust me, there are people who will sign up
I don't have to talk to
to take you out.
Make me a water, man. She said double fish with alcohol and drinking water.
For the death of a lot of important people, we want closure. We want to have some explanation, but maybe we're not going to get it. Maybe that's one of the things that often happens in history.
And there's never been a clear understanding of what happened. There was a investigation into Martin's passing. Really, was never much of an investigation.
So leave it on?
I think that people didn't want to know the truth.
You said what?
As they didn't want to know the truth about Martin Luther King.
No, not the fan on there.
Well, there's just more. There's more there than anybody was ready to face.
I'm glad I looked it up.
Including the family.
And they run
and the
around.
main thing that they wanted us to do was to keep the movement going, which we've tried to do.
Those who gave and sacrificed their lives and the lives of their loved ones, the generation that paved the way and changed the world in the 20th century, reflects now and offers younger generations sage wisdom.
Because I think Martin explained it better when he says you can legislate everything but love. You cannot legislate love.
When kids grow up, this whole generation of kids has grown up thinking of women as bitches and hoes. And they were acting that way. Now, it wasn't their fault. But let's don't condemn everybody and everything. Dr. King taught us, and he said this at the time of the watch riots, when people are placed in darkness, crimes will be committed. But the guilty are not just those who commit the crimes, but those who create the darkness.
Yeah, he just want to be around me.
But how did you get to that point? Somebody had to die. Somebody had to go to a school and get brutalized. Somebody had to sit on the lunch counter. Somebody had to sit on the front seat of the bus. Somebody had to refuse to give their bus seat up, like a Rosa Parks. Somebody had to do this to get us to where they are. But when we hear our young folk with their music and their singing, they don't know. How can you call my mama bitch in a song and you don't know her? How can you do that? And I think we have to get our brothers and our sisters who accepts it,
That's not being celebrated.
who participate in it, to realize that they have to respect themselves in order for others to respect them. Because if I go around every weekend with my wife, other folk in the neighborhood won't start with them.
I'm so disturbed now. That's where we are now, with what drugs has done to whomever drugs. That's just mind-boggling for me. I just can't get that one together. Drugs. That's the worst thing. Then disease. That's another thing. Then young black Americans now, just to say the word about dress, the way they dress, the language, music, language, all that kind of. It's just a chaotic mess as far as I'm concerned, and all of that needs to be addressed and put together. So I'm just blown away.
These young folks that's going through it right now is just a small period. Somebody gonna lead them out of this. The pants down on the butts. Somebody gonna lead them out of this oozes. Somebody gonna lead them out of this babies making babies. Somebody gonna lead them out of this prostitution.
Oh, you
Somebody
damn.
gonna lead them out of this gang.
Who fuck people first? Women or men?
We got to get in that spirit.
Freedom is a constant struggle.
Male life is more birds
It's
and guys
just
than girls, man.
all that changes is the scenery and the weather. And this is just another phase of that struggle to move from nobodiness to somebodiness.
What's written on the young child's slate from the time they are born until they are 6 years of age is what's going to determine, in most cases, how they grow up. And he said that what is happening is that we have the wrong things printed on a lot of these young folks' slate. That's what's happening here. We got absence of daddies. We have mothers who are working like heck 2 jobs and don't have the time to. So the mother has to put the child in the school and count on the teacher to do a part of what she should be doing. Mothers are tired. You got baby daddy coming by ever so often, not doing anything but just coming by to visit, etc. You don't have the church pushing the way they used to push. You don't have civic associations pushing the way they used to push. And what do you have? You have these children who are born, and I'm sure many of them, when they look at the TV and they look around and they see their circumstances, they say, what is that for me?
When a family works together, then that is, our strength. And, that was, and sort of, Ambassador Young sort of addressed that in a, similar way today. He said that although it wasn't a legitimate family per se, still the family was sort of torn apart. And I think, although families do sort of separate, and go their own way. In our particular case, we really need to stay together because we're attacked from so many angles. And if there was a more cohesive position and stance, it would help us. And to, also, I think it would help to deal with the doubts and the trust issues.
But the thing I will always remember is that in the midst of her explanation, she always said to me, you must never feel that you are less than anybody else. You must always feel that you are somebody, and you must feel that you are as good as anybody else. And of course, this came up with me in spite of the fact that I still confronted the system of segregation every day.
When you love your enemies, you take away their power. Nobody can hold me in bondage with hatred. Because when I love back, then I'm freed. And eventually,
it's straight, but I don't like it no wine.
Say that when God gets ready
to make change,
changes will be made.
I just told her that she got him.
No, she didn't.
If I can help somebody,
her.
as I pass along, if I can cheer somebody with a word, a song, if I can show somebody that he's traveling wrong,
is that a pretty fish she taking?
they're not living, not being paid.
I know she probably got no ass.
Still got joy. Still got joy. After all the things I've been through, I still got joy.
Be just like that, like shopping it, like beach stores.
Still got joy.
Be like,
still got joy. After all the things I've been through, I still got my joy.
No, she's celibate.
Oh, bitchin' sauce is so good.
Bitchin' sauce. She said bitchin' sauce. Look it over again for him.
Keep striving.
That's all they talking about. Mushroom jerky. Apple with oh my god, y'all, I'm gonna throw it.
Bro, don't have no real snack. Bro, don't have no real snack.
Wow. You ever seen it?
Say what?
They got food for your blood type.